Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. As I say, it's a lovely evening, and what I'm going to do is this evening I'm going to talk about one of my favourite topics, which is motorcycle collisions and filtering. So, who are we? Motorcycle Law Scotland was founded by myself 10 years ago now. I've been a civil litigator for about 32 years, specialising in motorcycle collisions. I've worked for 2 firms before that as a partner in quite a well-known firm, but I had this passion, this vision. I love what I do, and I take my responsibility to the motorcycling community very seriously. Yes, you can do this job if you're not a motorcyclist, but I believe if you are a motorcyclist, you add that edge to what we do. So a little bit about me. I'm a motorcyclist. I actually dug this photograph out. I found it in the back of a drawer. I think it was before I started highlighting my hair. Yes, that's a Scottish summer. It must have been early 80s. I think it was RSA, when you went camping with your motorcycle and you had the de rigueur biker's jacket, a pair of jeans, and I think I had on a pair of fisherman's socks, and that was about it. Fast forward years later, that's me up at Glencoe with rods. I was doing, I think, a wee trip for, I think, the ambassadors, Live Fast, Die Old. And I am a member of IAM. I managed to sneak through my advanced about 2 years ago. And I felt it was really important to do my advanced rider because, as I say, I always strive to improve my motorcycle riding as best I can. And it was certainly one of the best things I've ever done. If you could imagine day in and day out, I come across motorcyclists that have been injured, often through no fault of their own, sometimes through part fault of their own. And so I felt it was important for me as an individual to try and improve my skills as best I can. So moving along swiftly from that dreadful photograph, common motorcycling accidents. So as a firm, we represent motorcyclists because we are motorcyclists. And this is just a snapshot of the most common motorcycle accidents. Junctions, overtaking, roundabouts, group riding can cause problems, road surface defects, well, we all know about that, filtering. And this evening we're going to talk about filtering because it's probably the most contentious type of case that you come across. There are loads of decisions about filtering. And there's some confusion. Is it a filter? Is it an overtake? What is the law? And the truth of the matter is, if we can describe filtering as simply this, it's a means to make safe progress in stationary or slow-moving traffic. Filtering is perfectly legal. If you look at, for example, motorcycle roadcraft, can we look at motorcycle roadcraft? There's a really good chapter on filtering. So this is the police rider's handbook. If ever there was an endorsement that it's perfectly legal, well, there you go. Filtering also features in the highway code. The main rules, the first one is, this is a section in the highway code, road users requiring extra care. And basically advises drivers it's often difficult to see motorcyclists, especially when filtering. Rule 88 applies to us, the motorcyclists, okay? When filtering in slow-moving traffic, get this, take care and keep your speed down. So let's have a look at what IAM says about it. And I really do like the IAM approach to filtering through traffic. Interestingly, IAM's views on the matter only filter when surrounding traffic is moving at less than 20 miles per hour. Then don't exceed it by about 10. So IAM is basically saying a filtering maneuver should really only be carried out about 15 to 20 miles per hour. Staying safe is the main priority in all of this. We can talk till the cows come home about our right to filter, but at the end of the day, it's all about staying safe. So we will start with a video clip of filtering. Watch this. Okay, this was Edinburgh, very busy rush hour traffic. You can see you've got stationary traffic and a motorcyclist deciding to filter. Classically, a car pulling out of cars wanted. We will come back and revisit that later. Some of you might have views on it. If you've been involved in a filtering accident and you've been injured, you would go to a lawyer, hopefully a specialist lawyer, and our job is to establish a number of things to help you. First of all, is there a duty of care? Of course, we all owe each other a duty of care when we interact with one another on the road. Has there been a breach of that duty of care, and have you been injured? So that's what we need to establish. You cannot recover a penny in damages unless you establish that someone else was at fault. Filtering's rather interesting because sometimes there will be part fault on both sides. The other thing, if we move along, that is important to our legal system, because we can't have a webinar from a lawyer without a Latin maxim, stare decisis. And basically that's to stand by things decided. So often, I mean, this is a judicial doctrine under which a court will follow the principles and rules of decisions from higher courts. We have a separate legal system to England, but a decision in the Court of Appeal in England can be quite persuasive in a court in Scotland. And this will become important as I go on this evening, because insurers love to cite previous cases and say, this is a Court of Appeal decision. This carries a huge amount of weight. And therefore, in these circumstances, if you've been filtering, we think this applies. So let's have a look at one of them going into the age of motorcycling. We're going to start off in the 1960s. Highway Code, there you have it. I don't think in the 60s the Highway Code even had a chapter about motorways, let alone filtering. I think it was only in the 1970s they stopped asking you about hand signals in your motorcycle, well, in any kind of test for driving. It was the end of austerity, life was good. People had money in their pockets for the first time, and you saw, the cafe racer, people, young teens in particular, influenced by the likes of Marlon Brando and James Dean. And they were spending the money on some of the following motorcycles, the classics from the ages, if we can just have a quick look at them. The Vespa, BSA Super Rockets. And interestingly, many of you might know that young teens split themselves into two different groups, the mods and the rockers. And we all remember, I think it was Brighton Beach in 1964, there was a big stramash between them. And the reason I'm starting at the 1960s is there's actually a decision that to this day is always referred to by the insurance industry. And we're going to have a look at that decision at the moment. It's a Court of Appeal decision. It's called Powell v Moody. Now, what happened here was Powell's a motorcyclist. We have 2 lanes of traffic, as you can see. And he was filtering up the stationary traffic. There's a gap in that traffic, and the driver pulled out, Moody. There was a collision, and the motorcyclist was quite badly injured. As I say, this is a Court of Appeal decision, and you've got to remember, even as far back as the 60s, you know, this concept of queuing is massively important, some say, to the UK, that we love to queue. And, you know, even judges get quite cross if people don't adhere to that queuing system. But let's have a look at what happened, hopefully a little animation, as you can see. So here's the motorcyclist, and he's coming up. You see his views are massively restricted. Can't see a thing. He knows, is there a gap? Yes, there's a gap. Hello. But what's the driver's view? Can he see? And there we have it. Different views, different angles, all restricted. And this is, as I say, a Court of Appeal decision, Powell v Moody, favoured by the insurance industry for a reason. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so in this case, and before I give you the result or the split in liability, one of the judges of the 3-judge bench said the following: any vehicle which jumps a queue is undertaking an operation fraught with great hazard. There was a dissenting judge, but let's have a look at the decision. Motorcyclist, 80% to blame. So if a motorcyclist is filtering up stationary traffic, approaching a junction, then he has to accept 80% to blame, according to the insurance industry. In truth, 1960s case, time has moved on, and I believe it's completely irrelevant, and importantly, each case is fact sensitive. There was a dissenting judge in that case, and he said it should have been 50-50. Here's another decision that is quite interesting from 1964. So we have a car coming out of a B-class road onto a major road, okay? And what we have is, I think this was a milk tanker that was stopped. Well, this was a bus that was trying to turn in left. My apologies. We have a large bus, and the bus wants to turn left into that junction. The motorcyclist previously had been following that bus, and seeing the bus's indicators come on, had started to execute a filter. And he was filtering up the offside of the bus. The driver thinks to himself, oh, the bus is turning in. It's turning left in here, so I'm going to pull out. Okay, so what was the result of that case? Car driver 100% to blame. Why? Because he pulled out when there was always the possibility of a vehicle, particularly a motorcyclist, that would be masked by the bus. So in many respects, it's a bit unfair because I'm only giving little snippets, but you can see different approaches. Let's have a look at the 1980s, because after all, we're all motorcyclists and we love our motorcycles. Here's some motorcycles. I do like the Suzuki Katana with the woman kind of perched, draped over the back. I've absolutely no idea what she's doing there, but in any event, thankfully times have moved on. Women do ride motorcycles, which is quite good fun. I don't know if any of you have ever had any of these, but a bit of nostalgia. So let's have a look at some decisions from the 1980s. This is actually quite an interesting decision. Again, Court of Appeal decision. And we have a car that's moving out of a minor road onto a major road. This time it's the petrol tanker that is stopped. There's stationary traffic, and this big petrol tanker is being very courteous. Stopped to leave the gap, to allow the car driver to emerge. Okay, we have a motorcyclist filtering down the offside of that petrol tanker, and there is the inevitable collision. From the decision, it's quite difficult to get an exact indication of speed of the motorcyclist. There was a range in one reported case of between 10 and 30, okay? And so let's have a look at what was decided in that case. Oh, 50-50. And the reason it was 50-50 is despite the motorcyclist filtering past a junction, get this, there is no principle in law which entitles you to emerge blind from a minor road to a major road, even by inching forward, at a stage, because you cannot keep going beyond your line of vision. Equally, the motorcyclist had put himself in a position of danger. So it's not dissimilar, is it, to Powell v Moody? But we have 50-50 rather than 80-20, so it seems to be a bit of an improvement as we're going through the ages. Talking of which, we've reached the noughties. I actually used to have a Suzuki SV650. I don't know if anybody's ever had a Dodge Tomahawk. This came from Goodwood, actually, and it said, the best bikes of the noughties. And I get the Aprilia, I get quite a lot, the Hayabusa. The Dodge Tomahawk, anyway. Let's have a look at what the Court of Appeal was up to. Really interesting case. Davis v Scroggin. Davis was very, very seriously injured. He's a motorcyclist. This is the A40. It's a long straight section of road. And there was a huge tailback because I think further down, they joined one of the main motorways. And Scroggin, he was an American, but very experienced driver. In his evidence, he did say he was agitated. It's hot, you're chewed, you're not moving anywhere, and you're on the wrong bloody road. And that's what happened to him. And he got stuck in this queue of traffic. Now, the motorcyclist, as we all are, we can make safe progress in slow moving or stationary traffic. It's one of the many joys of riding a motorcycle is when there is stationary traffic, we can filter. And Davis decided that he would filter. He was filtering up the offside of traffic, stationary traffic, doing 40 miles per hour. And the driver decided, you know what? I'm fed up with this. I'm getting out of here. And he does a U-turn. Think about it. 40 miles an hour, U-turn. Result. Aha. Why is the driver 100% to blame? I'll tell you why. Because it would have made no difference if the motorcyclist was doing 10, 15, 30, 40, 50. The driver didn't look. He executed a U-turn and didn't think there was anything coming up behind him. So that's why in that case, now, because the rider was doing 40 miles per hour, his injuries were very, very serious. Okay, and that is the correct decision. If a car pulls out and does a U-turn, that is the correct decision. So we're swiftly moving along to the teens. The teens. Anybody? Oh, a Yamaha. I've got the Yamaha MT9 as my bike of choice at the moment. So these are, according to Goodwood, you may have different views, the best motorcycles of the 20 teens. Let's have a look at what the Court of Appeal was up to in the 20 teens. This is an important decision because this is the first time you actually have a view about speed when filtering and what would be considered a reasonable view. Most of the decisions, they don't, yes, speed is relevant, but this is the first time the Court of Appeal said, well, actually, filtering should be carried out at or about. So let's have a look at this. What we have here is a tractor, large tractor, and we have a coach. The coach is driven by female driver, vastly experienced. We have a temporary traffic light, so you can maybe just see at the top, and we have this queue of stationary traffic. The tractor driver obviously leaves the gap. There's two motorcyclists, okay? Now, the following motorcyclist, he decides to wait at the tractor at the tractor's rear. He doesn't want to put himself in that position of potential conflict because he can't see this junction. The lead motorcyclist decides that he's going to filter up to the top of the traffic lights there. And as he does so, the inevitable happens. The coach driver pulls out and there's a collision. Okay. Now, she'd pulled out at the best angle she could get. She'd pulled out slowly. The motorcyclist was doing 20 miles per hour. So, result 50-50. And the reason it was 50-50 is, and this is why this case is quite important, is that the judge said, had the motorcyclist been doing about 15, I think potentially he could have avoided the incident. So that's been interpreted often by the insurance industry by saying, well, 15 is about the right speed to filter. What went against the motorcyclist, of course, is his mate decided, I'm going to err on the side of caution here and stay where I am. Another one that, again, is quite an important decision. Remember, Powell had 2 lanes of traffic, so 2 lanes of traffic becomes quite important. And this is a case where Jones is the motorcyclist. He is proceeding down. Remember, the 2 lanes of traffic, stationary, gaps left at the junction. So he's proceeding down. He was actually doing about 30 miles per hour. Lawton, he's in a car and he decides that he's going to pull out because he's wanting to turn right, traffic stop to let him out. Of course, what Lawton's doing most of the time is looking left. There's his danger. He knows the 2 lanes of stationary traffic. So he's looking to his left. He pulls out and there's a collision. Okay. So, wonder what we all think. 2/3, 1/3. Okay, so the car driver, there's more responsibility from the motorcyclist in those circumstances. So that's a little bit about the law. Insurance companies love to cite Powell v Moody, and in truth, lazy solicitors will run a mile from Powell v Moody. They will basically roll over and say, okay, and they'll tell motorcyclists to accept huge parts of blame for filtering. Partly they don't understand the law. They're not motorcyclists themselves. And if you ask me, they're downright lazy because you have to go and investigate your own case. Every single case is fact sensitive. I don't buy into the president saying, well, you must follow this decision. Load of old tosh. You investigate your case and you present the case. Don't leave any stone unturned. So here's a case study. This is Tony. Okay. Tony, motorcyclist, and every day he would ride his motorcycle from Bankery into Aberdeen. The first time I went to see Tony was in Aberdeen, and I stayed overnight in Bankery. I was in a car, and I can assure you I got stuck in stationary traffic trying to travel east into Aberdeen. It's an absolute bloody nightmare on the A93 first thing in the morning in Aberdeen. In any event, he's riding a Honda Hornet, 640 mile an hour speed limit, and he comes across stationary, slow-moving traffic. That happens quite a lot. He's in Deeside Road near Mill Timbers, so he reduces the speed to about 20 miles per hour, and he filters up the offside. He's in the westbound carriageway, which is clear. Nobody's coming out of Aberdeen. And he's traveling east. He's filtering. And what he said was, suddenly from Contlaw Bray, as I was filtering up, there was just, I see half a Skoda. It's right in front of me and it is so sudden. Remember, he's familiar with the area. He knows about the junction, but he talks about the sudden appearance. There's an inevitable collision. He fractures his right wrist and his right ankle, and he actually spent 3 weeks in hospital. He was referred by his insurer to a panel solicitor, and the panel solicitor said, ooh, Powell v Moody, but they've been a bit lenient. The defenders, car drivers, insurance company will offer to deal with the case, Tony, on a 65-35 split, with you bearing 65% responsibility. This was 2 years later. So they'd had it for 2 years, and the best they could do was tell this poor motorcyclist, look, 65-35 and you're lucky. And if you can imagine, the huge impact that has, he's seriously injured, an awarded damages gets reduced by 65%. So in any event, he came to me and I thought, okay, got the other solicitor's file. And I thought, oh, this is good, because on file, there was a witness statement. Okay. Now, if you remember at that junction, if you just maybe go back a slide, I don't know if the cars are there. Yeah, you see the Volkswagen motor van, that was actually a Scottish gas van, okay? And there was a driver in it. And he had stopped. He was saying he was just about to move again in traffic when he noticed this Skoda motor vehicle come down. And he gave a statement. Well, he wrote out a handwritten statement, but it was on file. And this is what he said. I'm not going to go through all of it, but the salient point is, as I started to move off, I got to about 15 miles per hour, and the Skoda Fabia came to the junction, then just pulled out in front of me. Get this, he looked left, but did not look right. So I see this on file, and I do my best to get hold of this witness, but he would not cooperate. Put him under citation, he wouldn't cooperate. So when I got Tony's file, I think I got it in December and raised it in court 6 months later, because I was absolutely sure that this idea he should accept 65% responsibility was appalling. And I thought, well, there's a good witness in there. I'll just lodge that statement because it was signed. The problem is I knew this witness was going to be hostile, wouldn't cooperate with me, and you never want to put a witness in court if you don't know what they're going to say. So there was a problem, however, with the police evidence. Oops, police involvement. We actually recognised the police officer. This is a bit unfair. If there's any police officers out there, this is a little bit unfair. The reporting police officer was 24 years of age. Nothing wrong with that. Start somewhere. Who said, I think he had 7 years police experience. And a recognition was taken from him. And he said, look, I went out there, I investigated it, and the Skoda came up to the giveaway lines, was entitled to pull out, and, motorcyclists collided. And we said, well, actually, it's a stop sign. Did you ask the Skoda driver if he stopped and checked? I didn't know it was a stop sign. So, well, yes, it was. And in the course of the litigation, of course, the defenders, knowing that the police had formed a view, the police had just, now I take the view, a police officer's job is to go to have a look at the physical evidence, but it's not necessarily their opinion that matters. However, when the police notebooks were recovered and lodged in court process, we had this wee gem to cope with. Motorcyclist heading city-bound tried to overtake a Scottish gas van who stopped at a junction to allow a Skoda to exit. Motorcyclist failed to see this and collided with. And that's a big problem. So we thought to ourselves, oops. Now we've got the police who are potentially going to be against us. We've got a helpful witness who's hostile. But guess what? Tony was credible and reliable. Really nice guy who said, I do that route every morning. I reduced my speed. And I tell you, that Skoda just came out quickly. I never got a chance. So we thought, well, we'll push on. And so we reconstructed the whole thing, a bit like the wee video, that we saw at the front. And that's thanks to our friends White Dalton in England, who, if ever you're involved in a motorcycle in England, go to White Dalton. They are brilliant. They're motorcyclists like us, and we take it terribly seriously. And we also like to win. So we reconstructed the whole accident. We look at datum lines. We look at widths of road. You can see there we did all the computer graphics. Next slide. You do all the computer generation, and we're ready for court. We're ready to go. We say we're filtering along, reduced our speed, driver comes out without looking, defenders say motorcyclist entirely to blame, or if not, has to accept a large element of contributory negligence. We got the case settled at 75-25 in our favour. Okay, so here's your chance. I know I've kind of whizzed through this, but it's just a little bit of, this is how the courts look at things, this is how we look at things. So have a quick look at the video again, and after all you've learned, I'm going to ask you, what's the percentage split? Who's at fault? So let's have a look at the video and what we've learned. Okay, so we have a junction. We have a motorcyclist. Some of you may have formed a view the motorcyclist is going pretty quickly. He's certainly gone a long distance. So, looking at some of the case law, V Moody perhaps. Remember, this is a junction, it's not a U-turn. Junctions are difficult when you're filtering. Remember, low speed operation that should be carried out at about 15 miles per hour. So, have a look at this and we'll try our poll. Whoa. You might think the driver is 100% to blame. Driver 75% to blame. Driver 50% to blame. Driver 25% to blame. Or driver 0%. And conversely, motorcyclists not to blame, 25% to blame, 50, 75, 100. So,
okay.
I'll let Rod do the voting.
I'm going to launch the poll, so to speak. You've got, how long do they have? 30 seconds?
20 seconds.
Okay, you should see that come up on your screen. So you've got an option to vote for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Oh, they're all voting. This is like millionaire. 61 of 74 have voted. 9 of you still thinking. Make a decision. Or maybe you haven't worked out how to poll. 66 of 74 have voted. Oh, 67. 90% of you voted. This is like the polls. High turnout.
Indeed. So,
right, so you've got 5 more seconds to vote, and then we're going to close the polling. The phones are going to go down. The voting is going to be completed. And oh, here we go. There we go. Is the poll ended?
Okay. Now, remember what I said at the beginning is every case is fact sensitive. And whenever I intimated that claim, the insurer said, V Moody, and I said, take a hike. Absolutely not. And they said, well, you have to accept some blame. You're filtering past a junction. And we do a lot of work. And I thought, oh, who's the witness, this, that. And I got hold of all the witnesses. And one of the witnesses was actually a driving instructor. And he was sitting with his pupil in that car. And he said, I saw the whole thing. And here's the dash cam footage. And some of you who are a bit eagle-eyed might have noticed what I noticed. And aha, where's the driver looking? The whole time he moves forward, he's looking left. If he's looking left, he will not see a filtering motorcyclist at 5, 10, 15, 20, 30. It doesn't make any difference. And so when I sent them that little clip, and I said, your policyholder is looking left the whole time. The result, car driver, 100% to blame.
Now, do you want to see what the results were? I can tell you, 25% of you have got a gold star.
Hey!
So that's 17, that's interesting. So 75% of you went with the wrong lawyer. Here are the results. Hope everybody can see those. You seen those, Brenda?
Yeah, but I think, to be fair, to most people, if you look at the case law, if we hadn't got that video footage, okay, the motorcyclist didn't even see this driver necessarily. He was filtering at speed. And I think, in fairness, without that footage, there would have been, I would have conceded an element of contrib, but filtering past a junction, depending on the speed, I always go for the driver's 100% to blame. I might concede about 20%. So it's not unreasonable for anyone to think in those circumstances. What I say is, because we work and work and work at cases, we find out witnesses. We won't just say to a motorcyclist, oh, accept part blame. Absolutely not. Every single case, fact sensitive, don't give a toss about precedent, about insurance companies citing cases from the 1960s and telling me it's relevant today. Absolutely not. You're an individual, your accident circumstances and how you're injured are completely different to anyone else's. And that's our job. And one thing about filtering, if we just move on, I think the final couple of slides, it's dead simple. If in doubt, don't. Because we all talk about our right to filter, this, that, next thing. And however, there's a risk. And the problem with filtering is you can put yourself in a position of danger. And the horrible thing is, and this is what I witness day in and day out, motorcyclists are vulnerable to serious injury. Never feel pressurized into filtering. If you don't want to do it, hang loose, don't do it. And keep speed down, particularly on motorways, okay? I'm of the view that a filter should not be carried out anything more than 20. That's my view. I think you're in some difficulty. Though I would always argue your point. So if you're filtering on the M8 on a Monday morning, mind you, it's not like it used to be, and you're doing 40, 45, I will fight your corner if a car switched lane, because I'll just say that was caused by the car driver failing to look and you were there to be seen. But at the end of the day, if you get banjoed off your motorcycle and you're doing 40, it's the injuries that are the problem for you. Okay. Questions? Do we have any questions?
You had a couple of questions pre the webinar, which I've just put up on the screen here for everybody to see. If you can, I think you've probably answered those, but if you maybe want to have a look at those.
Yeah. Well, as I say, for the first time, in the Woodham case, you're looking at filtering. He says one of the judges came across, well, 3 of them agreed it was about 15. I think IAM's advice is about the best. And that will basically say, filtering slow moving stationary traffic, 15 to 20. I think you are at risk if you start to filter, certainly motorways, between lanes. When you're getting up to speeds of 30, 40, you're going to be in difficulty. And the difficulty you'll find yourself in is hospital and broken bones, which is the big problem. Yes, you can come to a lawyer, and somebody passionate about it, like ourselves, like White Dalton, will fight your corner. But, if you're not going to work again, will you ever get compensation to put you back into the position you would have been in but for the accident? So as I say, it's a matter of, if you're comfortable filtering, keep your speed down. That's my view.
Okay, thanks for that, Brenda. We have had 3 or 4 questions pop up, some good ones here. You probably can look at them, but I'll read them out to you anyway. Neil has asked, should investigating officers, police, I guess, officers at the scene, not have a motorcycle background similar to yourself in order to have a non-biased view for bike accidents?
Well, again, you can find yourself, the answer to that is no. A reporting officer is a reporting officer. Some of them have very limited experience. They might be beat officers. We actually like it when the traffic officers attend. We particularly like it when the reporting officer is a police motorcyclist, because they do a brilliant job. And so you do get that. So Is there a requirement? No. It's the same as lawyers, of course. You can get a personal injury lawyer who doesn't know the first thing about motorcycling and filtering, and you refer to them through your panel solicitors. So they're still a lawyer, they can still do a job. So no, there is no requirement, and it can make life a little bit difficult because judges and sheriffs like police officers. They think their evidence is quite valid. And so it can be a bit of a problem. But that's why we go to collision investigators and, assess our case. And the truth is, 98% of actions settle without going to court. It's only about 2% of personal injury actions actually make it to court because the system is designed to encourage settlement.
Okay. Niles asked the question in relation to the filtering. A lot of the case law was all to do with bikes on the outside lane, filtering on the offside of the outside vehicle. What's your view and experience of filtering between stationary lanes?
Not advisable, well, unless, okay, motorway traffic, M8, 2 or 3 lanes. If you've got, motorway and dual carriageway, you can filter between lanes. What you've got to watch out for there is swapping, okay? If you've got, for example, the A road or even those 2 lanes of traffic, urban roads, then you're generally speaking filtering up the offside. Of course, motorways, big dual carriageways, it's perfectly acceptable to filter up between lanes. Keep your speed down though, because what will happen, what car drivers are like. The inside lane starts to move forward. They go, oh, swap. And they swap over without looking behind them. And so, yes, you can filter between lanes.
Okay. Dave's asked a question in relation not to this particular seminar or webinar, but the pillion situation with insurance, which I think you're aware of last time when Thomas was presenting. There was a question about pillion insurance. Do you want to take time, 2 minutes?
Yeah, of course. Insurance companies, it's all about assessment of risk, okay? And so that's why young people pay more in insurance than older people. If you're carrying a pillion, there is an assessment of risk. Why? Pillions actually go like Exocet missiles when you're involved in a collision. They go pinging, winging, and they're often very seriously injured. And of course, there's all sorts of risks there because if the motorcyclist has done something daft and their pillion is very seriously injured, then the insurer has to pay up huge sums of damages. So on that basis, you can find reasonably that insurers will sometimes add on or weight your premium if you're carrying a pillion. Why? Because you're at risk of causing that pillion, significant harm. People say, well, it's not fair. If you're driving a car, you don't pay more if you're going to take passengers. But that's because, generally speaking, you're surrounded by metal cage, airbags, all sorts of things. It's particularly, so there can be weighting. Some riders, if you want to take a pillion, it's not extra. Often, if you find that it's an older motorcyclist, so it's all assessment of risk. Somebody asked very quickly, and it's a really good question, what's your view on filtering on main beam? And of course, we're always told that you should not dazzle drivers. It's as simple as that. You're not supposed to have your main beam on at all. And of course, you've got to balance that off against visibility, don't you? And interestingly, when I was doing my IAM course, my instructor, or I don't know, he'd said to me, right, come on, Brenda, it was City Bypass, classic, round the back of Edinburgh. And he said, get your main beam on and let's go. And I'm thinking, good. And I didn't put my main beam on, didn't tell him. But I think it's actually, you're wanting to be more visible. I think the highway code says you shouldn't, but in daylight, if you're wanting to be seen, does it matter you're dazzling somebody in their, mirror? I think nighttime's different, but a lot of riders will put on their main beam during the day to filter. Maybe someone from IAM can answer that better than I. I wouldn't criticize it. I would say you're just increasing visibility. But as I say, I'm a lawyer, and I wouldn't fault anybody for doing it, but it might be the answer for somebody in IAM.
Okay, another couple of questions, Brenda, and then we'll certainly answer all of these questions for those of you who can't get to, but we'll just like to take a couple more. Question on, would you advise riding with a bike cam at all times? Is that important?
Definitely,
valuable?
definitely, brilliant. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Any
Video
evidence you get,
doesn't lie.
yeah, I really I'm in favor of this massively, helmet cams, anything you've got. And that is really important. It's the best evidence you'll get, because as you see from the dash cam, we saw the driver looking left the whole time. Without that, there would have been a split in liability.
Neil's got a question. Interesting scenario. You're on a dual carriageway. You're filtering, I guess, slowly between the two lanes of stationary traffic, approaching a pedestrian crossing with a green light for traffic. Are you okay to proceed to filter over the crossing?
No, you shouldn't filter. Okay, there's certain times when you shouldn't be filtering. You shouldn't be filtering, past solid lines, and certainly zigzag pedestrians. So you've got to be very careful where you filter. As I say, filtering is a means to make safe progress. So don't put yourself in a position of conflict unnecessarily.
Okay.
And you could find yourself with, what would ever happen at that situation if it's a pedestrian that's walking across those traffic lights and you're filtering through. That's your problem.
One final one, just giving us a bit of a European feel here. Dominica was asking, obviously, as the world opens back up again and we perhaps get a chance to hit the roads outside of Scotland, is it possible to discuss the different filtering aspects in European countries, of which I know there are different rules, particularly in Germany and France? I think the answer to that perhaps is, don't know. Maybe you and one of our colleagues who has done a lot of European riding might be able to answer that. We'll try and come back to you on some information, perhaps after this webinar. Okay, I think that's about it really for now. I'm conscious of time and everybody's got things probably to do. Can I just thank Brenda for another really interesting webinar, a really valuable topic, I think very important for everybody. And thank you for your time. And thanks for joining us again. This actually is our 10th birthday. We're off to celebrate 10 years looking after, or not maybe celebrate, well, just recognize 10 years looking after injured motorcyclists. So hopefully we'll be able to do that for many more years to come. And thank you very much once again for joining us. We look forward to you coming back hopefully next Thursday for the next webinar, and we'll see you then.
And can I just wish everybody a happy Easter and stay safe.